Imagine, just for a second, an entire subcontinent literally holding its breath. The year is early 1947, and the air is just incredibly thick with tension. There are communal riots breaking out, and a political deadlock that seems honestly utterly unbreakable. In today's Explainer, we're diving into one of the most massive, rapid, and truly consequential geopolitical shifts in all of human history, the partition and independence of India. We're going to see exactly how a story of freedom suddenly became a story of a ticking clock and incredibly rushed borders. So let's just dive right into this. To really understand the sheer urgency of this moment, we have to look over at London. British Prime Minister Clement Attlee was sensing trouble basically everywhere. The Congress-League coalition back in India was proving to be completely unworkable. So, on February 20, 1947, Attlee stepped up and made this historic announcement. He declared that the British would transfer power regardless of whether Indian politicians had actually agreed on a new constitution or not. Basically, the British were packing their bags. So, the original target date, June 1948. The British government even laid out a backup plan. They stipulated that if a fully representative constituent assembly wasn't ready, like if the Muslim-majority provinces flat-out refused to join, they would literally just hand over power to the existing provincial governments in those specific areas. It was meant to be a hard, definitive end date. But, as we're about to see, even that really tight deadline, there was no way it was going to hold. Now, to manage this massive exit strategy, the British sent in a new viceroy to replace Lord Wavell. Enter Lord Mountbatten. He arrived with some pretty broad, informal powers to make decisions right there on the spot. But he very quickly ran into a harsh reality. The previous roadmap they had, the Cabinet Mission Plan, he realized it was totally unworkable. A dead horse, as it was called. The demand for partition had completely solidified, and M.A. Jinnah was absolutely obstinate. He wasn't going to settle for anything less than a fully sovereign state. Seeing this incredibly unyielding political landscape and the rapidly escalating violence on the ground, Mountbatten makes a drastic, massive pivot. He just completely scraps that June 1948 deadline and severely compresses the whole timeline. Suddenly, the date of independence is pulled way forward to August 15, 1947. You might be wondering, why the sudden rush? Well, the British really wanted to secure the Congress Party's agreement to Dominion status, and frankly, they wanted out. They wanted to entirely escape the responsibility for the rapidly deteriorating situation on the ground.
Section 1. The June 3 Plan. Blueprint for Partition.
Okay, so think about this logistics problem for a second. How do you actually divide a massive, incredibly diverse subcontinent in just a matter of weeks? Mountbatten needed a formula and fast. The mechanics they came up with were actually remarkably simple. In the really contested provinces of Punjab and Bengal, the legislative assemblies were split up to meet in two separate groups, Hindus and Muslims, and they just voted on partition. If a simple majority in either group voted for it, the whole province gets split, and that is exactly what happened. The assemblies voted for division, which meant East Bengal and West Punjab were headed to Pakistan, while West Punjab and East Punjab would stay with the Indian Union. But what about the rest of the map, right? They used a few different mechanisms. Referendums were held in the Northwest Frontier Province, where, interestingly enough, the provincial Congress actually sat out and refused to participate, and also in the Sylhet district of Bengal. Both of those referendums swung in favor of Pakistan. Sindh and Baluchistan, they threw their lot in with Pakistan as well. And to figure out exactly where these new lines would physically be drawn on the earth, two boundary commissions were rapidly thrown together to literally demarcate the new borders in Punjab and Bengal. Section 2. Birth of Two Nations, the Rush to Independence. With this whole blueprint finally agreed upon in India, the spotlight shifts back to the British Parliament. On July 5, 1947, they passed the Indian Independence Act, which was based entirely on the Mountbatten Plan. Less than 2 weeks later, July 18th, it gets royal assent. And then, less than a month after that, the whole thing goes live. Pakistan becomes independent on August 14th, and India gets its freedom on August 15th. The old Central Legislative Assembly is automatically dissolved. It's wild to think about, but two independent dominions were essentially born overnight. Now here's where things get kind of interesting. The two new dominions took very different approaches to their day one leadership. Under the new act, each dominion was supposed to have a governor-general. Pakistan chose M.A. Jinnah to become its very first governor-general. India, on the other hand, made a pretty unique transition choice. They officially requested the British Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, to actually stay on and continue as the Governor-General of independent India just to help oversee this massive transition. So, legally speaking, how on earth did these countries actually run on day one? They didn't have their own constitutions finalized yet. The constituent assemblies of each new nation basically took on the powers of the legislature. But for that transitional period, the day-to-day government of both India and Pakistan was carried out using an older British law, the Government of India Act of 1935. Think of it as the temporary legal glue holding the entire administration together while they built something new.
Section 3. Integrating the states. Vallabhbhai Patel's strategy.
Now we have to talk about a massive internal puzzle. Remember, the British leaving meant that British paramountcy over hundreds of princely states just completely lapsed. They weren't automatically handed over to India or Pakistan, and the pressure on these local princes was immense. Between 1946 and 1947, there was this huge upsurge of the state people's movement. Citizens were actively demanding political rights. Jawaharlal Nehru, presiding over conferences in Udaipur and Gwalior, laid down a very firm line in April 1947. He openly declared that any state refusing to join the Constitution Assembly would literally be treated as hostile. So enter Vallabhbhai Patel. He steps up to take charge of the newly formed States Department in July 1947. Patel was a total master strategist. He used this incredibly skillful combination of baits and threats in a two-phased approach to literally stitch the map of India together. Let's break down exactly how he pulled this off. In Phase 1, Patel's sheer genius was making the initial offer almost impossible to refuse. By August 15, he asked the princes to sign an instrument of accession that only gave the central authority control over three specific things: defense, external affairs, and communication. Why did they agree so fast? Because the princes were surrendering stuff they never truly controlled anyway. The British had always handled those areas. Plus, Patel promised no immediate changes to their internal political setup. It worked like a charm. By Independence Day, basically all the states had signed, with the really notable exceptions of Kashmir, Hyderabad, and Junagadh. Now, Phase 2. This was a much more difficult process. Over the next year, Patel had to push for full internal integration. That meant merging states with neighboring provinces or creating entirely new units like Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh. To get this rapid political unification done, he offered some massive baits. We're talking generous privy purses and really prestigious titles like governor in Free India. But looming right behind that bait, the very real threat of mass popular pressure from those state people's movements. This incredible feat of basically redrawing and unifying the map is widely considered to be Patel's absolute greatest achievement. Which brings us to a really crucial final thought today. If there's one thing you take away from this explainer, it should be the sheer, dizzying velocity of these events. That original target of June 1948? Tossed out. Independence was rushed through in just a few weeks during the sweltering summer of 1947. The British accelerated the timeline to basically escape the responsibility for the communal situation, and in doing so, they left behind rapidly drawn borders and hastily integrated states. So we really have to ask ourselves, did this frantic rush to the exit ultimately define the borders, the triumphs, and the enduring conflicts of modern South Asia? It's a profound question, and one that absolutely still echoes through the subcontinent today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.